Hello there. Today we're going to talk about topic one in our course. We're talking about adjusting to modern life. All right. So this is a good time to maybe explain a little bit. Many universities have a course called the Psychology of Adjustment. And in fact, at Texas Wesleyan University, this course used to be called the Psychology of Adjustment quite a few years ago. But then what happened was most students, when they saw this title, the Psychology of Adjustment, they didn't understand what that meant, right? They didn't get it. So a name change was put in, and the course is now called the Psychology of Everyday Life. And it's perhaps more understandable to students that are ready to sign up for the course. But again, it's always been called the psychology of adjustment. Okay, so here we go. We're going to talk about adjusting to modern life. So I kind of want to put a tiny little background. We are the product of both nature and nurture. And we'll be talking about nature and nurture, and that is to say, you're a product of the genetic material that makes you up, and you are the product of the experiences you have across your lifetime, nature and nurture. Well, it turns out that the nature that you have, the genetic material that you have, the brain that you bring with you as you use, which you use to solve the problems, to adjust to the world, is fundamentally the exact same brain using the exact same cognitive mechanisms that have been used for 10, 20,000 years. Now, the problems that a caveman had adjusting to the caveman life is definitely not the same problems that you have adjusting to modern life. And yet somehow you and that caveman are walking in with the exact same nature. Now, don't get me wrong, you have different nurture, different experiences and exposures, but fundamentally both you and the caveman are running on the same fundamental hardware. Hence, there is a fundamental disconnect or mismatch between these things. So right up front, we need to know that adjusting to modern life is not always easy because we've already been given a handicap even before we started, faulty system to work with. All right. So the paradox of progress. This is very interesting. We have more technological advances, more leisure time. Wow, look at that. More leisure time, more choices. I mean, we have so much stuff now, but we're not happier. We think that our life is if anything, worse than our grandparents. It's like, but you have so much more expendable income, so many more options. You can buy tomatoes in December, and we take it for granted, but the ability to buy a tomato in December is just overwhelmingly amazing. It just shouldn't be possible, okay? And yet we're not happier, okay? And why? Why is it? Have we changed our idea of what's important? Yeah, guess what? 10 years ago, I wanted a smartphone. Today, I need a smartphone. And so, yeah, we're changing our ideas of what is important, okay? What do we need? Are we becoming more selfish? I'll leave that question for now. So you take a look here on this graph. What we've got is along the bottom here, we've got time, and across the left side, we've got percentage of people that agree with this statement. So they asked people, is it very important? I believe it was even incoming college freshmen, if memory serves. They asked freshmen, is it very important to develop a meaningful philosophy of life? And is it important to be very well off financially? And as you can see across time, the proportion of students that said, yes, it's important to develop a meaningful philosophy of life has plunged, and the proportion of students that said, yeah, making money is the only thing that matters, has gone exactly in the opposite direction. And so what we find is that we've become a society that has become in pursuit of more and more money, more and more. And you never have enough, of course, because I mean, you have a beautiful house, your neighbor has a beautiful house plus a boat, right? So we're gonna talk into that. The paradox of wait a minute, I just did that. Here you go. So let's talk a little bit. I don't know. This is the psychology of everyday life. Self-help books. I'll tell you my opinion. Self-help books are a load of shit. Okay, I have to put it out there. Most of them are bullshit. I just By far the majority of self-help books, what happens is the person writes a self-help book, they take it to a publisher looks at the self-help book, and here's what they do. They say, how much money will this make us? They do not even once consider, is there any truth in this book? The publishers didn't care if there's any truth in the book. Why would they? The only thing they care is how much cash will this make us? Okay, so right up front, I mean, the entire publication system behind self-help books is fundamentally flawed. It's on a financial basis. So I've just got to be very careful. One of the earliest self-help books I remember when I was growing up as a kid. It was a long time ago. And so what it was called was Looking Out for Number One. Okay? And it was a self-help book that basically says, put yourself at the center. Never, never sacrifice for yourself if others, and that was the fundamental nature, and it led into the very selfish me 1980s is really what it led into. But nowadays, maybe that might be an extreme, but the very fact that a book can exist called Looking Out for Number One tells you the fundamental nature of what they are. All I can say is self-help books and self-help on the internet. I looked up on YouTube. I was looking up videos that I might incorporate into this class. So I looked up self-help books on YouTube, and it was obnoxious. Okay? Don't go there. It was bad. But here's the deal. If you're going to go to a self-help book, and there are some that are out there. I mean, I've seen some good self-help books. My PhD advisor wrote a book. It was not intended to be a self-help book, but it could considered to be a self-help book, and it was basically on self-control. And the book was grounded in empirical research, period. Okay? Every single chapter, you are going to find references to primary sources, published articles, etc. Another one I've read somewhat recently was Grit. And again, Grit wasn't necessarily, that was Angela Duckworth's book. And Grit wasn't necessarily written as a self-help book per se, but it could be used as a self-help book. Well, one self-help book that my wife likes, whatever, is The Five Love Languages. Who is that? Gary Chapman. I don't know. It's an intriguing book. Is it grounded in solid experimental research? No. Would I use this as a way of changing my life? No. Would somebody else? Potentially. Okay? So be very careful. Even this book, which is supposedly a, quote, Christian book, is fundamentally flawed because the number one goal is make money. Okay? It's not like tell the truth or make your world better or something. Okay? So now I want to talk a little bit about psychology. Okay? Now, psychology is a pretty cool discipline. I love psychology. I could tell you the background on psychology. Psychology is a beautiful thing. What happens is philosophers ask questions about human nature and what's our purpose and etc. And then the physiologists studied about human physical processes. And what happened was the physiologists were grounded in the scientific method. And so when the philosophers and the physiologists got together, you essentially took the questions from philosophy and the scientific rigor and methodology from physiology, put them together, come up with psychology. So at its core, psychology is a science, okay? It is a basic academic discipline of science, period. And so what we find, however, is that this scientific discipline of psychology, whose job is to discover the laws of human nature, for lack of a better word, the laws. However, psychology is also an applied discipline where we take those fundamental laws and apply them to perhaps solve real-world problems. And so, as I think I had mentioned at one point before, clinical psychology can be both a basic discipline where you find the fundamental laws and an applied discipline where you take those fundamental laws and use them to solve some real-world problem. Adjustment. Well, here's kind of a funky thing, as I already kind of said. you are coming into the system handicapped with limitations upon your biological systems, which let's say, just here's a very simple example of a psychological mismatch. It's in the world of animals. But you know, when little baby sea turtles, right? Mama sea turtles, they come up on the beach, they lay their eggs, they bury their eggs, little flippers, flip. Mama goes off. Okay. Now, baby sea turtles hatch. And now they have an instinctive mechanism inside themselves that is go towards the light. Okay? And the light would be the moon reflecting off of the ocean, right? And so they've got a trigger inside of them that basically triggers a behavior of, and so all of a sudden these baby sea turtles were perfectly well adjusted to their environment, okay? The behaviors they exhibited, the environmental demands that were asked of them, they matched. Well, then along comes human beings and they create beach houses with all of these floodlights out on the beach. And so the baby sea turtles are born and then they go to the light, okay? And so all of a sudden the stupid sea turtles are right out there where the seagulls are going to eat them, okay? And so now we're having problems with sea turtles because of stupid humans. But these baby sea turtles are simply doing what's reflexive and instinctive inside of them. They are attempting to adjust. They're attempting to take the problem the world throws at them, the behavioral solutions that they know, and try to make them match. Well, that's our problem, is that the fundamental behavioral solutions that we might fall back on may not match the world that we need. And so adjustment is about making these come together. Okay? So it's a pretty cool idea. I like it from an evolutionary sense. It's like adaptation, adapting to your environment, adjusting to the demands. All right, so we need to talk a little bit about science because, again, I mean, if nothing else, if you don't walk out with psychology is a science, okay? You must walk out with that, please. All right, so psychology is fundamentally a science. And so we find that science actually arose. When science arose, very briefly, there was two major forms of philosophy that were popular: empiricism and rationalism. Empiricism basically was a philosophy that said, if you want to learn about the truth of the world, you look at the world. Okay? You derive everything from physical experiences, you see it. Rationalism was a philosophy that was much the opposite, and it said, if you want to know the truths of the world or how the mind works or something, you shouldn't look to the world, you should look inside yourself. You know, turn inside yourself and think on it. Okay? And so there was these two philosophies, you know, these two, like, how do I learn about the world? I empirically look at it, I rationally think about it. Well, science was a blending of these two. I know what we'll do. We'll combine empiricism and rationalism and make everybody happy. In fact, when science was first created by Francis Bacon, people were like, what is this thing you call science? Is this a new form of religion? What is it? You know, it's like, it's just a new way to learn about the world, to learn truth or something. And so what happens is in science, we often use the experimental method. Okay? So in the experimental method, very briefly, what happens is scientists use rationalism to generate theories. Okay? I have a theory about the color of cars and the speed of driving or something. I think the color of car influences the speed at which people drive. How did you derive that theory? Oh, I turned inside myself. I used my powers of rationality to think about that. Aha! So now that you've used your rationalism to generate your theory, I think we should empirically measure people's driving speeds and car colors to see whether or not the data does in fact support the theory. Okay, so you've got yourself a combination of rationalism in which you generate theories, empiricism in which you gather data to test those theories. So keeping it simple. So now, in experimental research, an experiment is very critical. This is weird. Experiments, we're going to talk about other forms of research studies coming up, okay? But let's just say that psychology has four goals. to describe, explain, predict, and control behavior and mental processes. That's the four main goals of psychology. And what we find is that the last goal, to control. Now, control is a weird thing, but so let me explain this. Experimental research is the only research that will allow for control. So, how does that work? Okay, let's say, for example, I was able to establish a causal relationship. Listen to this. A causes B. Sounds very simple, doesn't it? Here's the deal. If you know for a fact that A causes B, if B is something that you like, B is a good thing, and you know A causes B, turn on A. And if B is a bad thing, I do not like B, well then turn off A. You are in charge. Once you establish A causes B, you are in control. In fact, that very last, describe, explain, predict, and control. And so it is only experimental work that allows you to establish A causes B, and it is this establishment of A causes B that really puts you in control. And so ultimately, the control aspect, and control sounds horrible. It sounds like you're, programming a robot or something, but it's not. It's you're in, describe, explain, and predict are important things to understand how the world works. Control is make the world a better place. In fact, stepping back to Francis Bacon, the father of science, Francis Bacon from day one said, the goal of science is to make the world a better place, period. That's it. That's why it exists. There's no other reason for its existence. So it is only this last thing, control. A causes B. So this is why experimental research is so incredibly important. So in experimental research, what happens is an investigator manipulates something. Let's say, for example, you wanted to find out about car speeds or something, okay? And so what happens is, as I said, car colors and speeds. So what would happen is you would look at car color and then measure driving speed. But this is a fundamentally flawed system because for all you know, people that are more aggressive like red, and people that are more aggressive drive faster. And so now all of a sudden you're going to get this false impression that red cars cause people to drive faster. It's like, no. Yes, it's true, people in red cars drive faster, but it's not the red car that's creating this situation. It's the aggressive people like red, aggressive people drive faster. So if you did not do an experimental study, so imagine this experimental study. I will manipulate. I will take 100 people and I will randomly assign 50 of those people to drive a red car and 50 of those people to drive a silver car, and then I will simply measure the speed at which they drive across a 1-month period. Okay? Now, if I get to the end of that and I find my independent variable is, I think it says it up here somewhere. Anyway, my independent variable is the color of car. My dependent variable is speed of driving. And if I get to the end and I find that those that were in a red car did in fact drive faster, now I can say color of car causes speed of driving. Gotcha? If you did not randomly assign people to groups, then you cannot say A causes B. Okay? Powerful study. So here's a very powerful thing right here, in fact. Check this out. We've got a study here, and in fact it goes like this. There is a relationship. This is a statement of fact now. There is a relationship between the amount of breastfeeding children get and their intelligence score at age 8. Okay? So children that get more breast milk have higher intelligence scores. Statement of fact. So what happens is that I still remember when my wife was pregnant with our first child, every time we would go to the obstetrician, I guess that's the baby doctor, there would be signs all over about breast milk or breastfeeding. And it was horrible. I mean, mothers were basically being told, if you don't breastfeed, you failed, right? You're just a horrible person or something. Well, the problem is there was this assumption. Don't get me wrong. As a fact, children that are breastfed have higher IQ scores. I'm not denying that. That's a statement. But what was happening is there was a misunderstanding, and there was this belief that breast milk causes higher IQ scores. It's like, no, 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 no. Let's think about that a little bit critically and say, you know what? Being able to breastfeed is not an easy thing because mom has to be home. And if mom is home breastfeeding, mom can't be out earning a paycheck. Who can afford to do that? Oh, I know. People that are rich. That's who can afford to have mom stay home. Wait a minute. So, rich? You mean they're able to afford to send their children to a superior preschool? Yeah, they can. They can take their children on museum visit. Yes, they can. And so all of a sudden you find that the relationship is true, period. Children in a breastfed have higher IQ scores. I'm not denying it. But the problem is that they're not related in this. There's this other factor out there, money perhaps. So some researchers took this problem head on, and here's what they did. They randomly assigned. So they took 50 moms that were pregnant, and they asked them to volunteer to be in a research study. And before we tell you which condition you're going to be in, do you volunteer? Okay, this, you could be in the experimental group, you could be in the control group. So after these mothers said yes, then they were randomly assigned to feed their babies either breast milk or formula. And in fact, what they did was to keep everything as similar as possible. The breast milk was expressed with a breast pump. Don't ask. And put into bottles, okay? So that all infants are being fed from the same bottles. They're being the mothers are being taught the way you hold your baby is this. They're given the exact same bottles to work with. So all of a sudden, everything is the same between these two groups of children. They've been randomly assigned to their conditions, and the only thing that's different is half of the babies are getting breast milk and half are getting formula. And so now, follow up on these kids at age 8, and what do you find? There's no difference in their intelligence scores. None at all. I was like, wait, what? Yeah, because when you randomly assign, then all of a sudden, every rich mother had an equal likelihood of ending up in the breast milk group or the formula group. So all of a sudden, once you removed, income from the story, once you randomly assigned it, story's gone. Okay, so powerful stuff. Yes, like we just said, experimental research, the advantage, cause, and effect. Now, there are disadvantages to experimental work, but I'm going to give you a hint. My PhD is in experimental psychology, so I'm not really a big fan of discussing disadvantages because there really aren't very many. Don't get me wrong, experimental research is more difficult to do, it costs more money, it takes more time, but ultimately experimental research is the only one that establishes A causes B. And it is only the A causes B that allows us for control, and it is this control that allows us to make the world a better place. So I'm going to have a hard time talking about disadvantages, but whatever, okay? So another type of research that's out there is correlational research. Correlational research just looks for connections. And I already showed you a correlational finding. There's the relationship between the amount of breast milk a kid receives and their intelligence at age 8. I mean, that's what correlations are all about. They are true, they are relationships, but they very much lack the causal connection. Okay? So what we find is that correlational research allows us to find relationships that do in fact exist, but fail to tell us why they exist. Okay? So as a very simple example to give you that idea, there is in fact a relationship, a correlation between self-esteem and depression. Okay? That is to say, if somebody has low self-esteem, I predict that they will also be exhibiting symptoms of depression. Okay. I do a pretty good job of predicting it. So it's possible that people with low self-esteem, this low self-esteem could cause them to be depressed. Yeah, I can feel that. It is also possible that somebody that is exhibiting symptoms of depression, it could cause low self-esteem, right? And I was like, okay, I can kind of vision how that might work. Or it's possible that a third absolutely unrelated factor, such as distressing biological event or distressing events in the environment, a biological predisposition, might be causing both of these. I don't know. It doesn't change the fact, though, even though I have no idea why on this relationship, I still, if somebody has symptoms of depression, I predict they'll have low self-esteem. It doesn't change the fact that that relationship is in fact true. Now, correlations can come in three different, it comes in two main ways. You got positive and negative correlations. Positive correlations are situations where as one variable increases, the other one increases. So you've got, say, for example, age and job satisfaction. As a rule, there are always exceptions, don't get me wrong. As people get older, they tend to be more satisfied with their job. Tend to be. There's going to be exceptions. Go up to Walmart, see the 75-year-old, Walmart greeter, and I really don't think some of them look all that happy, okay? So all of a sudden you've got 75, miserable. Okay, you got it. But it doesn't change the fact that the general relationship is there. As a general rule, as age goes up, job satisfaction goes up. Negative relationships, on the other hand, are an opposite. And that would be, say, for example, let's see. Here you go. Number of years of education and amount of crime you commit. Something like that. And so the more education you have, the less crime you commit. But I mean, there's many relationships that are negative as well. And there's nothing inherently special about positive or negative. Since correlations allow you to predict things, it doesn't matter whether it's positive or negative. Prediction is prediction. Okay? There are some other ways to gather data in science that, again, my degree is in experimental psychology. It is what it is, okay? Naturalistic observation, case studies, surveys, things of this nature. We find, what? I already said that. What is that coming from? What? I missed that. All right, here, let me go back here. There's other things besides correlations. Naturalistic observation is to basically go out into the world and look. And I mean, that sometimes naturalistic observation is the only way to gather data. Because, I mean, the fact is, going back to experiments tend to be contrived. That is to say, often when people walk into an experiment, they look around themselves and they're like, I wonder what it is they want me to do. And so you don't get real behavior. You get some kind of an edited form of behavior. And the goal of science is often to know real behavior. And so as an interesting example, Jane Goodall, very famous primatologist, she wanted to know about chimpanzee behavior. And she started to go to the zoo in London to study them. And she realized these monkeys are doing really weird things. This is not normal. And she came to a conclusion very quickly that the behavior of chimpanzees in captivity isn't even close to the behavior of chimpanzees in the wild. And so she devoted her entire life to naturalistic observation, research studies, finding out real behaviors. Okay? Case studies are often used if you want to study, like say, Sigmund Freud. I do not like Sigmund Freud, and this is one reason I don't like Sigmund Freud. But Sigmund Freud was famous for case studies. What he did was he would spend many years studying just a few people, and then he would use the information from these few people to create general theories of human behavior. Oh, that irks on me in a big way. But the idea is, in a case study, you devote a lot of time to one or just a few individuals and then work from there. Surveys are basically a form of observation, except, in observational research, you, the researcher, have to literally go out and see things. With a survey or a questionnaire or whatever, I ask you to respond to me. Like I say, how frequently do you go to the beauty salon or something? And so you give me a response, an observation for all practical purposes, right? You observe your own behavior and report it to me. So obviously surveys are really nothing but observational studies, just cheaper. Okay, I did that. Oh, here. All right, so let's take a look. What is it? We want to talk about a very, very, very important thing, happiness. In fact, William James, one of the very important founders of psychology, American founders of psychology, he basically says happiness is at the core of everything we do. Deep down, secretly, every behavior we exhibit is done in such a way that it is intended to maximize our happiness, something like this. And he's on to something, okay? Deep down, every decision we make is intended to maximize our happiness. So what is it that has been found? So, as we said already before, people believe that money will buy happiness. But the fact is, money is not highly related to happiness. Age is not highly related. Parenthood, intelligence, attractiveness, these things are not highly related to happiness. Okay? They're very minimally related, in fact. Things that are moderately important, however, or moderately related to happiness is physical health, social activity, and religion. These are things that are partly, and happiness is related to health, right? But they're connected to each other. So here is, for example, here, look at this. On the left side, you've got average per person after tax income dollars, whatever. In other words, how much money people have. And so you see the green line, people's money. We're shooting through the roof here, okay? We really are as a society. But look at this little orange line, percentage of people that are very happy. And it's quite the same. Even though we're getting much, much, much richer, people just aren't reporting that. And so we find that though it is a strong belief that more money will create more happiness, the reality doesn't pan out. But there are some exceptions here. I want to make sure this is clear, and that is that I've just seen some more recent work on this connection between income and happiness, or money and happiness, and found that there are exceptions. That if you use your money in the appropriate ways, it can in fact buy happiness. And that is to say, if you use your money to buy experiences, not objects, but experiences. Or if you use your money to buy more free time, use your money to hire somebody to do the chores that you don't want to do, right? Of course, you've just dumped your dumped the unhappiness on somebody else. But the point is that there isn't this fundamental relationship between money and happiness. But if you use your money in the correct way, maybe so much. So what does be important? Love, marriage, and relationships, absolutely. Satisfying work, absolutely. Genetics, this is very powerful. Some people are just born with genetics which give them a higher baseline happiness level. Some people are just walk into life happier. But this last one is actually pretty cool, flow. Flow is an idea. It was put together by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Good luck with that. The spelling would just kick your butt. His name is like 17 or 18 letters long. I don't know what it is. But what Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi said about flow is that true happiness, see, we come to believe, oh, happiness comes from a party, whoa, this big explosive. But even Epicurus, the ancient Greek philosopher, said these big highs are almost always followed by the hangovers. Right? The big party is followed by I spent all my money. Okay, and so even Epicurus back in the 3rd century BC said true happiness comes from moderation. And this is kind of the same thing as flow, because what flow is according to Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, is that true happiness comes when you become so engaged in a task that you lose track of all time. You are in a flow. And I mean, you can get flow in just simple, like knitting or something of this nature, or crochet, or it tends not to come. Flow tends not to come from those things that people traditionally link to being happy. Okay, so flow is kind of a cool idea. I like flow. Flow is nice. As I said, it links back to Epicurus. In fact, here is an interesting connection here. We've got two lines here, money and love. And so what we find is that they ask people two questions: how important is money in your life? How important is love in your life? Okay, and so as we can see on this graph, let's just start with money. On the left side, people that say money is very important, you see their life satisfaction is very low. People that report money is not very important, their life satisfaction is high. And it's the opposite for love. Okay, is this a real surprise? I hope not. Okay. Yeah, that happiness is a subjective feeling. Yeah, this is the problem is that we are fundamental, and we're going to talk more about social psychology, but we are fundamentally social creatures, that we do not exist as independent entities, and it's silly to think that we could possibly have a self that exists independent from the world around us. And so what we find is that happiness is a relative thing. That happiness is like, in fact, here, this is an old cartoon under my face here. It's High and Lois. I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember this one. But you see what we got here. I mean, it's a little small on my screen, but if memory serves, what happens is the two children are like, they're at the county swimming pool or something. They're like, where's the water slide? Where's the big waves, etc. And there's a mom, and she says something like, I knew we shouldn't have taken them to that water park. And so the idea is that these kids last week loved the pool. But then they went to a water park one time, and now the swimming pool sucks, right? Because it's all a comparison. That's what happiness comes from. Huh? Relative deprivation. Yeah, this is rough. This is like relative deprivation. See now, there's an old Indian proverb, no, Persian proverb that says, I was sad because I had no shoes until I met a man that had no feet. All right? Wow, okay. Compared to the dude with no feet, I am in excellent shape. And that's really what relative deprivation is about. We make comparisons of satisfaction and standards of good enough based on the people around us. So let's say, for example, you get a raise. Okay? Yeah, you got a $10 raise, woohoo! And then you find out the guy next to you got a $20 raise. Oh, shit. Right? All of a sudden your raise is no good anymore. Okay? Well, it's like, wait a minute, but you were satisfied with a $10 raise a couple of minutes ago. What happened? Okay? Because we're fundamentally social creatures. All right, here's another link, another one that kind of, whatever. Okay? So, how to be happier. Yeah, money doesn't buy happiness. Again, unless you use money for the appropriate things. And I'm going to tell you what. Here's my super secret secret, super secret, whatever, to happiness. Okay? Underbuy on your home. When you go out to buy a new house, whatever they offer you, the bank offers you some money, take half of it or less. Okay? Don't buy it, because guess what? You're going to find that you have bedrooms you don't even go into. Okay? Underbuy on your house. You will now have a savings account. Guess what you can do with that savings account? You can buy experiences like vacations. Okay? I'll tell you, that's my secret success. I just went to Europe, and you know what? No big deal, because I already had the money, because you know what? I underbought on my house, and therefore I had money in savings to pay for Europe. Been to Europe twice in the last 3 years, okay? And I'm probably going to go again next year. So it's just ain't no big deal, because I underbought my home. This is my own little secret anyway. Take control of your time. I like act happy. Seek work and leisure that engages your skills. Yeah, you will not be happy if you take a job that does not, in fact, challenge you. You need to be challenged, okay? You need to exercise. Sleep, by the way, close relationships. So there's a lot of different things that you can do to perhaps increase your happiness. All right. We can also apply psychology to other things, such as how to improve academic performance. Because that is, again, this is psychology is an applied discipline. We can fake the basics. So ways that we can develop good study habits. It's really kind of an interesting thing is that things that are difficult, when you do them enough times, they become a habit, and then they become easy to do. So we can find that set up a schedule, find a place. Yeah, you can figure that out. We find that many students, we are discovering, fundamentally don't know how to read. They fundamentally have never been taught how to read. They fundamentally have been come to believe that when you pick up an academic textbook, you can read it in the same way that you read a novel or a blog post. It's like, no, you cannot, okay? You really need to be actively engaged. You need to, perhaps you've heard of SQ3R. You need to actively, in SQ3R, it is a study technique in which the way to success is a 5-step method. Number one, the first thing you do is you survey, you read the chapter headings. Often one of the best things you can do is go to like an extended table of contents in a textbook. Of course, our class doesn't have a textbook, but yeah, all right. Look at the headings of the lecture notes. Get an idea of the structure of the material. Second, create some questions. Just based on the structure alone, create some ideas, some question, call it a theory. We're in science now, right? Create some theories about what's going to be happening in the chapter. Read the chapter. Then go back and sort of rehearse it and remind yourself. And then finally, the chapter reviews are critically important in most textbooks. So SQ3R has scientific backup to show that people that use it do in fact perform better. And then finally, you can apply some of the principles of memory. See, in the cognitive psychology class, I teach in fact, the course is called The Psychology of Cognition and Memory. Oh, I think I just called it cognitive psychology. It used to be called cognition and memory. And so in that course, there is a variety of principles that have been, that come up, those things that improve memory. Well, it turns out that study time or memory is improved if you study across a long period of time as opposed to a short period of time. Memory is much better if information is organized as opposed to randomly presented. It turns out that, overlearning, that is to say, even though you've learned all of the material, keep studying it. Okay? And so all of a sudden what happens is that there's a variety of techniques that you can use to apply the principles of basic psychology to the application of, in this case, improving academic performance. All right, so we're going to start talking, and I believe our next topic after this one is stress. Could be. We'll find out when we get there.